If you feel broken or flawed and wonder why you don't fit in, listen to this story of a crooked tree that stood taller than all the rest. In a forest dense with towering pines, grew a tree named Alder whose branches twisted in every direction, but whose roots ran deeper than anyone could imagine. The wind hummed softly through the needles of the tall pines, filling the air with the fresh scent of pine resin and earth after a gentle rain. Sunlight filtered unevenly through the thick canopy, painting mottled golden patches on the forest floor. Yet amidst this familiar tranquility, Alder stood apart. His trunk curved sharply to the right before bending back, making a crooked silhouette against the sky. Unlike the straight, proud pines that surrounded him, Alder's shape was anything but perfect. From a distance, the villagers who sometimes wandered the forest saw him as odd. A twisted old thing, they would say with a dismissive shrug. But those who stayed longer found something else, a stubborn strength that defied the crooked bends. Alder's bark was rough but tough, cracked here and there, like wrinkles telling a story no other tree could claim. His branches stretched out in strange angles, as if reaching for secrets whispered only to him. Alder liked the solitude, the quiet rustle of leaves, the gentle buzz of summer insects. Even the occasional chatter of birds made him feel alive. There was a rhythm to his days he cherished, the way light shifted through his branches, the soft soil that cradled his roots. Sometimes a deer would pause beneath him, seeking shelter from the sun, and Alder would feel a quiet joy bloom inside, like a secret shared between old friends. But not all days were peaceful. For years, Alder noticed how the other trees seemed to grow straighter, taller, more pleasing to the eye. The pines stretched upward like pillars, unbending and majestic. Their branches formed perfect cones, smooth and symmetrical. People admired those trees. They carved their names into their trunks, leaned against them to rest, used their strong wood for homes and fires. Alder, crooked and odd, was left out of these stories, forgotten like a scar on the landscape. At first, Alder did not mind. He told himself that nature had its ways, that maybe the forest needed a twisted tree like him to remind others of things unseen. But a strange ache began to form, gnawing at his heartwood like termites. Why am I so different? He wondered in the depths of silent nights. Why couldn't I be like the others, proud, straight, admired? One autumn morning, as the sun spilled liquid gold over the forest floor, a group of children entered the woods. Their voices rang out, cheerful and full of life, echoing between trees. Alder watched as they ran past the straight pines, eager to find the tallest, strongest tree to climb. One boy, eyes bright with determination, spotted Alder and paused. "Look at this one," the boy exclaimed. "It's all bent and ugly. Why would anyone climb that one?" His sister laughed. "It looks like it's sick or broken." Alder's bark seemed to tighten with something unfamiliar. Shame, maybe, or loneliness. He wished he could shatter the awkward arcs of his limbs so they would fall into perfect symmetry. But the branches remained stubbornly crooked. "Come on, Max, that tree's no good for climbing," their mother said, calling from a distance. "Better stick to the straight ones." Their footsteps faded, leaving Alder swaying alone in the chill wind. Days turned to weeks, and Alder's solitude grew heavier. Birds that once nested in his twisted arms chose the neat pines nearby. Squirrels shunned his bent branches, preferring the sturdy limbs elsewhere. Even the moss that carpeted the forest floor seemed thinner beneath his shadow. One evening, Alder overheard a conversation between two elderly trees. Their voices were low and rough like cracked bark. "You see that crooked thing? It never stood a chance," said one. "Maybe, but that tree lives longer than the others," the second replied thoughtfully. "There's resilience in those bends." Alder felt a flicker of something new, a spark of hope hidden beneath years of self-doubt. But still, the world outside saw only his flaws. As winter approached, a fierce storm swept through the forest. Winds howled like wild beasts and rain pelted down in sharp sheets. The straight pines swayed but stood firm. Alder braced himself, his bent branches creaking under the pressure. The storm tore through the trees with relentless fury. One massive pine, tall and proud, was struck by lightning and split in two. A younger tree, too brittle in its straight form, snapped at the base and fell with a thunderous crash. When silence finally returned, the forest was scattered with fallen wood, but Alder remained standing. Exhausted, branches dripping, he realized something he had never dared to believe. His crooked form had saved him. The twists and turns that he had despised bent and flexed with the storm, absorbing its wrath instead of breaking under it. Winter's embrace was harsh. Snow piled heavy on the uneven branches, and cold seeped deep into bark and root. Alder shivered once, then again, but he stood. In the quiet white blanket of snow, a soft voice called from the edge of the forest. It was Myra, an old woman who visited the woods to gather herbs. She had noticed Alder long ago but never lingered until now. Her eyes, sharp and kind, rested on the crooked tree with no judgment, only wonder. She approached slowly, her footsteps muffled by the snow. "You're a curious one," she murmured, her voice like the rustle of ancient leaves. "Not like the others, strange, twisted, but strong." Alder wanted to reply, to tell her the ache inside, how he longed to be different. But all that came out was the creak of branches and the sigh of the winter wind. Myra circled the tree, inspecting every kink and bend. "Most see crookedness as a flaw," she said quietly. "But what if it is the very reason you endure?" She reached out, her hand resting gently on the rough bark. "There's a story in every twist and turn. Stories that straight trees wither before they learn." The soft touch awoke something deep in Alder, something he had buried beneath years of longing and loneliness. Myra stood and looked up. "Would you come with me?" she asked. Alder had no voice to answer, but a sudden, strange courage sparked within him, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he was meant for more than the quiet edges of the forest. That night, as stars blinked awake in the ink-black sky, Alder dreamed of faraway places, ancient wisdom whispered by the wind, and a path that twisted as deeply as his branches but promised growth beyond any straight line. Days passed, and Myra returned with a woven basket of herbs, but also with stories. Stories she sang softly while sitting beneath Alder's crooked shade. She told of powerful trees that had bent but never broken, of rivers that twisted through valleys to reach the sea, and of lives that blossomed not despite imperfections, but because of them. Slowly the forest's whispers began to shift. The wind no longer mocked Alder's crookedness. Instead, it seemed to sing through his branches with a new melody, one of survival, resilience, and quiet strength. Still, Alder knew his journey was just beginning. The ache of difference still lurked deep inside, and questions circled his mind like restless crows. What did it mean to be crooked in a world that celebrated straightness? Could he ever belong, truly belong, or was his twisting shape a sentence to solitude forever? One crisp morning, as the first light painted the forest gold and pink, Myra leaned back against the crooked trunk. Her eyes gleamed with quiet mischief, hiding the wisdom of countless seasons. "Tell me, Alder," she said, fingers tracing the cracked bark. "What do you see when you look at yourself?" The tree swayed slightly, as if searching for an answer in the rustling leaves. "I see a failure," the thought whispered like a sigh. "A tree who will never stand tall and admired." Myra smiled, soft but knowing. She reached into her basket and pulled out a small, gnarled seed. "Hold on to this," she said. "It's the seed of a crooked tree, one that changed the fate of the forest." And then, her gaze piercing but gentle, she asked, "Are you ready to see why imperfect trees like you shine brighter?" Alder felt a stir deep in his roots. The answer was unclear, but for the first time, he felt the pulse of possibility thrumming through his limbs. The sage took a deep breath and began. "Once upon a time." The sage took a deep breath, and his words were like a soft wind through the leaves. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a stone, ordinary and small, resting quietly in a meadow. No one paid much attention to it, just another pebble beneath the feet of travelers. But this stone was different. Over time, a crack appeared in its surface. At first, it seemed like a blemish, a flaw that made the stone less whole. The old woman's eyes sparkled with the memory. The stone feared that crack. It thought it made it weak, useless, broken. But seasons passed. Rain seeped into the crack, then froze and thawed. The crack widened slowly and the stone began to split. "But here's the twist," she said, her voice lowering like a secret. Instead of shattering apart into many useless pieces, the crack opened the stone to something new. Tiny seeds found their way inside. Roots pushed through the crack, delicate and persistent. That stone, once just a humble pebble, became a cradle for life. Where it cracked, flowers bloomed. Butterflies danced around it. The stone's imperfection was the doorway to beauty the meadow never knew. She paused, letting the story settle in the cold air between them. "The stone learned," Myra said softly, "that its broken lines were not its curse but its blessing. Without the crack, it remained a silent, overlooked speck. But with it, it became a home." Alder's branches shivered not from the cold but with awakening. The arboreal old woman's story mirrored his own bent form. The flaws, the scars that felt like burdens, could instead be openings, invitations for something greater. "Do you see, Alder?" Myra asked gently. "Your crooked limbs and gnarled bark are your cracks. They are the places where your strength breathes, where resilience grows. You are not lesser because you bend, you are stronger because you do. Your shape isn't a flaw, it's your unique story." Alder swayed thoughtfully, the weight of years of doubt lifting, moment by moment. The story found a quiet place in his heartwood. "I understand," the thought came, fragile but clear. "My twists are not wounds to hide, but marks of endurance, a place where life can take root in ways straightness can't allow." The old woman smiled, sensing the shift. "Good, because every crooked tree has a purpose the straight cannot fulfill." That night, Alder stood beneath the stars anew, his branches not just crooked but alive with possibility. The next morning, as the sun slowly rose, painting the horizon in soft pink and gold, Alder felt a subtle change. The courage from the tale was a seed planted deep in his roots, and it began to sprout. The very next day, he stretched an awkward branch outward, dipping it toward the sun with newfound grace. It was a small gesture, but for Alder, it was the first step taken with intention. Days turned into weeks. At first, the transformation was silent and unseen. Alder found himself swaying not just with the wind's force, but with purpose. When birds returned, they no longer hesitated to perch on those uniquely twisted arms. Even the moss below thickened, drawn to the unusual light filtering through. Slowly, animals found shelter in his bends, discovering that the crooked tree offered refuge and calm. But the path was not without struggle. Some days, Alder still longed to be straight and simple like the pines around him. Old doubts clawed at his cambium. There were moments when the ache of difference returned like a chill wind, whispering that he might never be truly loved or understood. One afternoon, a strong gust knocked loose a twig, sending it crashing to the forest floor. For a moment, Alder felt fragile. Would the storm that followed break him completely? But then, recalling the stone story, he bent with grace, absorbing the wind's pressure instead of resisting it. When the storm passed, Alder remained standing, twisted but unbroken, his confidence deepening with each challenge faced. Weeks later, as winter thawed into spring, a group of villagers gathered for their annual festival in the forest clearing. This time, Myra brought the children to Alder. "Look closely," she said. "Not every tree is proud and tall, but every tree, crooked or straight, has purpose. Our twisted friend here has stood through storms that felled others. His branches may not reach straight, but they reach in ways no other tree can." One little girl stepped forward, eyes wide. "His branches are like arms stretching out to hug the sky," she said softly. Others nodded, "And they make such funny shadows." Children began to play beneath Alder's shelter, their laughter threading through the air like a warm breeze. Birds nested again, butterflies flitted, and the crooked tree hummed quietly with life. Alder's form would never be like the perfect pines, but he had found a beauty and strength in his bends that told a story far greater than height or symmetry. His imperfections were the reasons others came to shelter, to rest, and to wonder. With Myra's words echoing in his heart, he realized he belonged, not despite his crookedness but because of it. The seasons turned as they always do, and Alder grew, not just in height but in spirit. One day, a young tree sapling sprouted near his roots, its first shoots reaching curiously toward his rugged trunk. Myra beside Alder smiled once more. "You have become a home for many, Alder. Your crooked story shines brighter than any perfect tree's shadow." And Alder bowed slightly to her, whispered to the morning wind, "Thank you for showing me that being crooked means bending toward life in ways straightness never knows." And so Alder discovered that what once felt like a burden was his greatest strength, imperfection was his gift, resilience his story, and belonging not a destination but a journey he had always been meant to walk. That day, something changed not only for him but for the entire forest. The crooked tree stood proudly, not as an oddity, but as a symbol of enduring beauty and quiet power. Years later, when asked about his secret, Alder always said, "I am crooked not because I failed to grow straight, but because I chose to bend with the storms, and in bending I found my strength." This story shows us that imperfection is not weakness but the very source of our greatest strength. And you? How many times have you felt like the crooked tree, different, flawed, overlooked? How many times have you hidden your scars, wishing to be smooth and straight? How many days passed while you waited to be perfect before you could stand tall? As Alder discovered, true strength comes not from fitting in or being flawless. It comes from embracing your unique shape, your own cracks and bends, and using them to grow beyond any straight line. It's not about hiding your imperfections. It's about recognizing that in those very imperfections lies your power to endure, to shelter, and to shine. You don't need to change everything at once. Start today by accepting one part of yourself you've judged unfairly. One flaw, one scar, one crooked branch of your being. Look at it and say, "This is part of me and that's enough." Tomorrow, do it again. And day by day, your crookedness will bloom into a strength that no storm can break. If this story touched something inside you, don't let that feeling fade. Don't let the spark of hope die. Starting now, choose to embrace your imperfections as the source of your resilience. In the comments, write, "I am enough," just 3 words. Let those words seal your promise to yourself to stand tall in your own unique shape. Like this video if you're ready to embrace the beauty of imperfection. Subscribe for more stories that heal the heart and remind us all we are enough. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their crookedness is their strength. Remember, the crooked tree doesn't just bend, it reaches farther, holds more, and shines brighter because it is imperfect. Your imperfections aren't your weakness, they are your light. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be you.